So, for today's episode, I had this idea a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just going to run with it and see if you are interested in this. You'll have to let me know. But the idea that came to me was, how about if we start answering some of the most Googled questions about Korean beauty? And the reason for that is obvious, is that if they're the most Googled questions, they're probably the things that people are actually the most curious about. So I thought, why don't I attempt to answer some of those? And the thing is, I've run through, there's like a whole list of them, and a lot of them are very generic and very broad topics, but there's some meat and bones in there that I think a lot of our listeners will find useful, because I'm not sure that we've necessarily directly answered some of these. So I'm going to start doing some of these for our deep dive episodes. If you hate them, if you don't want to hear about it, if this is boring, please just let me know and we can do something else. But I just thought, for something a little bit different, I've never actually done this before, so I'm going to answer some of the most Googled questions about Korean beauty. And one of the first ones that popped up when I typed this into my Google search bar was, is Korean beauty natural? And this is obviously an impossible question to answer in a single sentence or a yes and no. So I thought what might actually be helpful is to take a look at how the process and the system and the framework actually works in Korea. So the starting point of any discussion about cosmetics in Korea is, of course, the Cosmetics Act, which is the main piece of legislation that regulates cosmetics. And then there's the body that oversees all of that, which is the MFDS, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. Now, the interesting thing when it comes to any discussion about natural beauty is that in a lot of places, a lot of different countries, the term natural skincare, natural cosmetics, natural beauty products is not actually regulated. So it's often left up to brands, individual companies to kind of decide what that means. And that surprises a lot of people. So Australia is one of those countries that leaves it up to brands to determine the meaning of natural. And the US is actually the same. So the FDA has confirmed that they, and this is a quote from them, do not define the term natural, and they have not established a regulatory definition for this term in cosmetic labeling. So they also don't have regulations for the term organic for cosmetics. Instead, the US Department of Agriculture, so the USDA, regulates the use of the term organic for agricultural products. So that's kind of different. Korea is a little bit of an exception to the rule, and that is that at the moment they do actually have legislation regulating the term natural skincare, and there are also supporting regulations and standards as well. So let's take a look at how all of this works, but then keep listening, because there's a little bit of an update to this as well that is going to impact on all of this. But basically what happened was, back in 2019, the MFDS implemented regulations on the standards of natural and organic cosmetic products, and this was actually set out. So there's various regulations. Article 14-2 of the Cosmetics Act sort of sets out a framework as well. So the regulation actually defines both organic and natural skincare. It sets out the permitted ingredients, the manufacturing processes, and the requirements for businesses as well. So the designation in Korea is 천연 화장품, and that literally means natural cosmetic. So there is a label, or like a sticker, a little thing that natural cosmetics in Korea have been using since 2019. And in order to get that little sticker or label that you can use, the product actually has to go through a pretty stringent process. And that involves quite a few different things. One is certifying the ingredients in the product. Obviously, if we're talking about natural skincare, people that use natural skincare products are particularly worried about what goes into the cosmetics. So in the case of 천연 화장품, natural cosmetics, the ingredients must be 95% or more naturally derived. But they don't kind of stop there. They also look into the manufacturing process of the product as well. So if we're talking about organic Korean cosmetics, that is slightly different. So you've got the certification for natural, but then in order to have the certification for organic, besides the 95% concentration of natural raw materials, you also need to have over 10% organic ingredients. So there's then this whole set of standards that are basically set out, and they are very prescriptive in terms of what the brand can and can't do in order to get their products certified as a natural or organic product. For example, the regulations set out everything from the types of materials that can be used, for example, natural ingredients, natural raw materials, water, those kind of things. They also set out what can't be used. So, for example, synthetic raw materials that don't occur in nature. So there's an exception for synthetic raw materials that are necessary for the quality or safety of natural or organic cosmetics, but that are difficult to replicate in nature. But again, those kind of ingredients can only be used within the 5%. So 95% of whatever they're putting into the product has to be natural. And then within that 5%, they make this exception for the synthetic raw materials that are necessary for quality or safety. Then the manufacturing process also, they set out requirements for that. It has to maintain the inherent quality of the raw materials and not cause contamination. So there's even like a list of cleaning agents that need to be used, and like there's a restriction around the kind of containers and things like that you can store them in. For example, PVC or polystyrene, they are out. So you can see that it's quite a stringent process for actually falling within this regime if you want to get your products certified as natural. So lots of different steps that you have to go through. But if you go through all of them and your manufacturer goes through all of them and you tick all the boxes, the product then is issued with a certification and this mark that designates it as a natural cosmetic. However, because you might have listened to all that and gone, geez, that sounds like a lot of effort and a lot of work, and it is. So I had a look, and between 2019 and 2021, there were only 34 products that were registered as natural and organic cosmetics. So that doesn't mean that only 34 products in Korea, in the Korean beauty sphere, met the legal definition of natural or organic. It just means that only 34 managed or bothered to go through that process of actually getting their products tested and doing all of that. Now, there are a lot of reasons, obviously, why a brand might decide against doing that. And one of the big ones that I can think of is actually just that Korean consumers have this real preference for, and they care a lot about the EWG rating system. Now, I've talked about this on the show many times. It like basically uses a red light, amber light, and green light approach to skincare that is super problematic and has been widely discredited by a lot of people in the scientific community just because of how they rank the harm of certain ingredients, and then that then goes into the product. When these apps that everyone's using these days, and it's like, is my product safe or harmful? And if you run them through these apps, they come up with like, oh, alert. This is the kind of thing that is really, really popular in Korea as well. So Korean consumers really care about that. But the thing about the EWG rating system is, because it is so enmeshed and inbuilt into K-beauty, particularly in Korea, a lot of the like hwahae and things like that, where people go to actually rate and rank cosmetics and leave reviews and things like that, that whole system is like already built into the app. So you don't need to go away and have your product certified by a third party, or, your ingredients and materials and all these things checked. You basically just formulate to those standards. So when you're working with your formulators, your team of cosmetic chemists, you obviously give them a brief of exactly the kind of product that you are hoping to create. And a lot of the time in Korea, it is a given, or a lot of formulators assume it's a given, that you want to manufacture to the EWG rating standard. So you kind of need to specify if you don't want to do that, because that's how ingrained it is. So then you just come up with a formula list, and that doesn't contain any of the red or amber ingredients, and make that product. Like, you don't sort of need to then go away and have this extra like complicating factor of getting a certification. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why this system didn't really take off in Korea, is because there's an easier way to do it, right? The other big thing is, of course, this system is only operational domestically within Korea. So like outside of Korea, how many people are going to necessarily care about this mark, this local domestic Korean mark, to certify that a product is a 천연 화장품? Like, I guess that depends, right? However, I wasn't the only one that obviously thought that this was, not a great system. And, the brands obviously didn't think it was a great system either, because you can see that not very many brands bothered to put products through the system. So the MFDS actually did identify that the low number of products being registered was an issue. So they've tried various things to kind of simplify the process and make it easier for brands to comply with. They tinkered around with a little bit in 2021, but essentially what they have come out and decided to do is actually scrap the whole system.